experience.
The two governments had agreed that Henry Kissinger's presence be kept secret. If the mission failed to produce a diplomatic breakthrough, no one would know. But the Chinese insisted on preserving the visit on film. The National Security Advisor had only 48 hours to lay the groundwork for Nixon's visit. Soon after the Americans arrived, word came that the Chinese premier, Zhou Enlai, was on his way.
Up until then, Kissinger was quite relaxed, but then he became very nervous.
Kissinger was about to greet the prime minister of a government America did not officially recognize, in a borrowed shirt, several sizes too big.
And there's that famous photograph that was taken of him and Zhou Enlai shaking hands. And whenever one saw Henry about that, he said, "Oh, there I'm wearing that shirt," you know. And he was very, very unhappy.
And on top of everything else was made in Taiwan and had a label made in Taiwan. And I used to joke that when I said to the Chinese on that trip that Taiwan was close to me, I really meant it.
Just how close to Taiwan America intended to stay was the critical question. All along, Nixon and Kissinger knew the Chinese would not cooperate unless the U.S. took a step away from Taiwan. The Chinese were waiting to hear the magic words. Nixon and Kissinger were ready to say them.
I drafted this opening statement for Kissinger, which said the United States did not support two Chinas, nor one China, one Taiwan, nor an independent Taiwan. And I sat there on the edge of my chair waiting for him to repeat this little bit about Taiwan, and finally he did. At which point, Zhou Enlai said, "Good, these discussions may now proceed."
Kissinger spoke carefully from thick briefing books. His counterpart, Zhou Enlai, appeared relaxed and more spontaneous.
He spoke from only one or two little handwritten pieces of paper. It's obvious that he'd written them himself. And he referred to his notes very, very rarely.
Kissinger felt that he was being upstaged. Here he was with these several books piled in front of him, so he slammed it and shoved it aside, and that was the last we saw of the book.
Kissinger then asked the Chinese for help in ending the war in Vietnam.
Zhou Enlai's reply was about what you might have expected it to be.
No deal. U.S. troops must go.
You must just get out. Let the Vietnamese solve their own problems.
But at the same time, the very fact that he was meeting with us could be seen by the Vietnamese as an act of treachery.
The next morning, the Chinese took Kissinger sightseeing. He had just one day left and did not have the invitation for President Nixon in hand. The trouble was the wording.
The Chinese wanted this brief announcement, in effect, to say, President Nixon was dying to go to China, and we're gracious enough to let him come visit us. The United States wanted to say, China would like to have Nixon come. Nixon's delighted to accept their invitation.
The delegations worked all night to find the words. At dawn, they had them. Once the announcement is made, Zhou Enlai told Kissinger, it will shake the world, which won't be able to sleep.
The announcement I shall now read is being issued simultaneously in Peking and in the United States. Knowing of President Nixon's expressed desire to visit the People's Republic of China, Premier Zhou Enlai, on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China. President Nixon has accepted the invitation with pleasure.
The reaction was swift. Taiwan's ambassador, James Shen, accused Nixon of selling out his country.
I got a 20-minute notice last night from Mr. Rogers, the Secretary of State. He called from California.
My friend Jimmy Shen, who was the ambassador, he was really taken aback, just shattered by this.
I say we regret this, and we lodge a protest, a strong protest.
Do you expect, on the basis of your protest, are you asking if the president not go to Peking?
Well, that's the whole purpose of the protest.
Nixon tried to reassure Taiwan and quiet the critics within his own Republican Party. He persuaded conservative leader Senator Barry Goldwater to support the China trip and sent California Governor Ronald Reagan to explain the new policy to Chiang Kai-shek. Personally, I think the communist Chinese are a bunch of murdering bums, Reagan wrote in a letter to a friend. But in the big chess game going on, where Russia is still head man on the other side, we need a little elbow room. There was one reaction Henry Kissinger wanted to hear for himself. He placed a call to the Soviet ambassador.
Kissinger called me and said, Anatoly, I've been on a trip. I knew he had been to Asia, but China? That was a surprise.
At the Central Committee, the news hit us like a bolt from the blue. My colleague said, America will be China's ally. Kissinger, what else has he agreed? When Nixon visits Beijing, anything could happen. All this will make things very difficult for us. Where will it all end?
Nixon's gamble worked. 4 days after his announcement, the Kremlin invited the president to Moscow. Long-stalled arms talks would now proceed.
As we moved closer to China, the Soviet Union didn't want to be left behind. They moved closer to us. So the Russian game made the Chinese game work. The Chinese game made the Russian game work.
But in September 1971, events in China threatened Nixon's strategy. After an alleged coup attempt, Mao's hand-picked successor, Lin Biao, was killed in a suspicious plane crash. Many high-ranking military leaders were replaced. Washington worried that the upheaval could jeopardize the president's visit. To test the waters, a full-scale dress rehearsal was mounted in January 1972. Once again, the president bypassed his State Department and chose Kissinger's deputy, General Alexander Haig, to represent him.
Much to the surprise of everyone, including myself, the president reached down and asked me to do it. I suspect he was trying to keep peace in the family, and I didn't represent a threat to anyone.
Home movies of the trip were taken by Nixon's chief of staff, Bob Haldeman, and his aide, Dwight Chapin.